everybody. Thanks so much for having me. Well, Neil talked a little bit about this, but it's been a week and a half since the United States elected a bag of dirt known as Donald Trump. And that's probably not right. He's more like a bag of poop. I just want to be accurate. And I can't tell you why that happened, but I can tell you that he ran one of the most racist and bigoted campaigns in modern American history. And I can also tell you that race and ethnicity and religion play a huge part in American society. So I thought I would tell you just a little bit about what it's like to be a particular type of minority in the United States. I'm an Iranian American Muslim female, like all of you, and that makes me a hyphenated American, right? Like, you might know a Pentecostal Indo-Romanian or a Jamaican Irish Catholic. Those are extra fun. But when you're a hyphenated American, there are no icons that represent you, right? There's no major iconic representations in culture and media and art. And so you sort of look up to nothing, and there's nothing that defines you. And the problem with the icons that we do have is that they're very limiting. They tend to define things, and those definitions can be very sticky. Let me give you some examples. Okay, when you think of the term dancer, you think of these ladies, right? They're wearing tutus, they might have an eating disorder, there might be like a black swan situation going on, right? But you don't necessarily think of these ladies. They're twerking or doing the Dougie or something, and either way, the iconic term for dancer just generally doesn't involve this kind of booty overload. Or when you think of the term artist, you might think of this guy. He's wearing a smock, he's got a strange haircut, he looks a little bit like an asshole. But you don't necessarily think of this person, who's also an artist, but a stand-up comedian, which generally it's not considered artiste, you know? Also confusing because this person is a lady, and ladies are generally not stand-up comedians. Now, when we're speaking about women have been presented as boobs and booty since the beginning of time. Here's boobs and booty in the 18th century. Here's 19th century boobs and booty. Here's 20th century boobs and booty. Here's 21st century boobs and booty. This is, by the way, a Negin Farsad original. It's felt tip pen on notepad, so it is available for $1 million. Talk to me after the show if you're interested. And if you think that women have had it rough, I want you to think about the plight of fruit. Fruits have been depicted as the prisoner of bowls since the beginning of time. Here's fruit in a bowl, here's fruit in a bowl, here's fruit in a bowl, fruit in a bowl. This is a first century fresco, you guys. Now, in the 19th century, a little-known artist named Paul Cézanne, he tried to draw fruit outside of a bowl, and for this violation of fruit iconography, Paul Cézanne was beheaded. Any art historian in the room can tell you that I just made that up. Okay, so now the question is, we get it, a lot of these icons are limiting, but who cares? I mean, does it really affect individuals? Okay, well, let's tackle that question, and you don't have to take my word for it. Let's let science do the heavy lifting by looking at the case study of Negin Farsad by Negin Farsad with a sample set of one Negin Farsad. Sample set size is very important in science. Okay, so like I said, I'm an Iranian American Muslim female. I'm also a comedian, and like most comedians, I have a master's degree in African American studies. Okay, and then this is the breakdown of the population of the department that I studied in at Columbia University. As you can see, the purple is all the black students, and the blue, it represents the non-black student. And I know you're wondering, why did I do this, right? Because I grew up kind of feeling kind of black. Sometimes sort of black, sometimes pretty black. Other days it was just Don Cheadle. Now, And it was always like this, okay? I grew up in a small town in Southern California called Palm Springs, which is one of the top 5 retirement communities and one of the top 5 gay cities in California. So it's the kind of place where people will be dancing to Lady Gaga while adjusting their catheters, you know? So This is a population breakdown of Palm Springs. As you can see, there's a lot of old people, a lot of gay people, a huge Mexican population. By the way, there's a guy down here. His name is Hassan Pat Ortiz Nighthawk Patel. He couldn't be categorized, so they had to give him his own space. So, as I mentioned, I grew up feeling kind of black, but the closest thing we had to black people in Palm Springs were the Mexicans, so I went with that. Now, I longed to be Mexican, and I know that some parts of my presentation may seem culturally insensitive, okay? But I just want to remind you guys that there was no such thing as cultural sensitivity when I was growing up. It was a lot like today. Here's the thing, because when you're and the reason I long to be Mexican is because when you're a member of a severely underpopulated ethnic minority, as I am, you want to glom onto the closest minority group. And I knew I wasn't Mexican, but I looked at the Mexicans and I thought, close enough. You know what I mean? I mean, have you tried the tacos al pastor? I mean, come on. So and nowhere was this more true than in school when the teachers called attendance. Because my white lady teachers in Palm Springs, they were able to pronounce all of the American names, of course, and also all of the Mexican names and the Spanish names. So they would go down the list and they would be like, Jennifer here, Chad here, Aurelia here, Rodrigo here. I mean, they were like rolling their R's. And then they'd come to me and they'd be like, Megan, no, Negin. Magreem, no, Negin. And then one day a woman said, Noodle, and she said, Noodle Farsad, and laughed and laughed. And I just wish that my name was something someone could pronounce. And by the way, I also thought noodle, like my people are a rice-based people, so that doesn't even make any sense. And I just, and Mexicans in my town, they had all of the restaurants, they had radio stations, they had icons, people like Cesar Chavez, and I felt like I wanted to be a part of this fight. So, that's what he looks like. I'm sure none of you know. So I graduate from high school, and I go to college, where all of a sudden, I see more white people than I'd ever seen in my entire life in upstate New York. And there's no Mexicans as far as the eye could see. Apparently, they go as far as New York City, and they stop. You tell me. So I'm in college, and for a second, I thought, okay, maybe I should try being white. Like, could I do that? Could I pass? You know what I mean? And I was just like, how difficult is it? It involves like monogrammed backpacks, right? Like it can't be that hard. But it turns out there's just far too much Dave Matthews and war involved in being white. And so that was sort of a non-starter for me. And that's when my black formation really began. I started studying the canon of black film. I started quoting this known James Brown impersonator. I started doing such revolutionary acts as wearing this Malcolm X t-shirt. Here we go. And wearing this Malcolm X t-shirt around campus. And then I graduate, and I go to get my master's degree in African American Studies, and that brings us full circle. But people were like, "What are you doing here?" You know what I mean? They were very nice and welcoming, but it was also strange. And so I said, "How could you say that? I will fight for African American rights whenever and wherever. I have the DVD box set of A Different World in my backpack. I'm about to change my name to Tyler Perry Presents Negin Farsad." But this was in the aftermath of 9/11. And they were right. I wasn't black and I wasn't Mexican. So what was I doing? But the icons that were available to me just didn't resonate with me at all. We had people like this woman, the eyeballs floating. We had these dusty dudes in the desert waving their AK-47s. And if you're Iranian like me, we had this special icon because we're always making nuclear weapons. In fact, I was just making some nuclear weapons backstage. So, and none of these icons made any sense to me. The kind of Muslim icon that really made sense to me was this woman. My mother. Imagine if every time you said the word Islam, you thought of her, right? So all our icons suck. What are you gonna do? You're gonna make new icons. And I use a tool of social justice comedy to do that. And I'll give you an example. I went on the road, I rounded up a bunch of Muslim American comedians in a nonviolent way, and we went to places like Arizona and Alabama and Mississippi and places where they love the Muzzies. And we did these shows, and we called the shows The Muslims Are Coming. And some people were very confused. And when we were in these towns, we would do these fun activities. We would set up an Ask a Muslim booth in the middle of a town square. People could come ask us questions. We would go bowling with a Muslim. We invited everyone from the town to come bowl with us for free. We learned that day that Muslims are really terrible bowlers. That's a new stereotype I'm trying to spread, so please tell all of your friends Muslims are really bad bowlers. It's better than the terrorism one. We stood in front of the Mormon temple in Salt Lake City, Utah, asking people to hug us. And if you have never stood in Salt Lake City and gotten the hugs of Mormons you have never hugged in your entire life, these Mormons hugged so strongly with the entire force of Joseph Smith, right? It was one of the most touching experiences of my life. So make new icons. Another rule of thumb I have is test the limits, okay? Whenever our leaders come out with policies, what do these policies really mean? And I'll give you an example. I made a video, I went out onto the streets of New York when Donald Trump announced his Muslim registry and his ban on Muslims. And I went on the streets of New York to do a religious test that I called the bacon test. So I would ask people, are you Muslim? And if they said no, I would say, prove it. And they'd have to eat from this cold pile of bacon. Now, if they didn't eat the bacon, I'd have them sign a Muslim registry, which looked a lot like a bridal registry. It was like really cute and had flowers on it and stuff. And then sometimes, Jewish people or something, they would say, well, we're not going to eat the bacon, but we're not Muslim, we're Jewish. And I'd be like, but you're Muslim, according to the bacon test. So I really wanted to test the limits of this kind of policy to show that it's unconstitutional, and we don't even have enough money in our budget to buy the bacon necessary to do it around the country. So that's one of my things, is test the limits. The next one is repeat yourself. People ask me everywhere I go, why don't Muslims denounce terrorism? Well, Muslims do denounce terrorism. We're just not going to give media attention to a bunch of reasonable people denouncing violence. So what I decided to do is launch a website called thedailydenouncer.com, where we denounce terrorism every day of the week, but take the weekends off. And they appear as single-panel cartoons of Muslims and everyday activities denouncing terrorism. So it's a website that not only denounces terrorism all the time, but it also questions why it is that we have to denounce terrorism all the time. This is my last point to you guys, is don't let people get away with garbage. Now, there was an anti-Muslim hate group in New York City that had spent over $300,000 putting up these anti-Muslim posters in the New York City subway system, the MTA. And and the posters were really ugly. They were poorly designed because it turns out bigots have a very bad sense of graphic design. But I thought, why don't we put up our own posters that say funny things about Muslims while also promoting my film, The Muslims Are Coming? So we worked with the MTA for over 5 months on every aspect of these posters, the typeface, the color, the word usage. For example, we weren't allowed to use the word poop or penis. That cut out like half of our material. So we made these posters, we got them approved, and then 2 days after they were supposed to go up, the MTA decided to ban the posters, saying that they were too political. Let's take a look at some of those posters. Here's one, facts about Muslims. Fact, Muslims invented the concept of a hospital. Okay, fact, grown-up Muslims can do more push-ups than baby Muslims. fact, Muslims invented Justin Timberlake. Here's another one. The ugly truth about Muslims. They have great frittata recipes. So either frittatas are deeply political for the MTA, or the mere mention of the word Islam was considered political, but it isn't. So we decided to turn our Fighting Bigotry with Delightful Posters campaign into a Fighting Bigotry with a Delightful Lawsuit campaign. We sued the MTA and we won after a year and a half. Thank you. And those posters went up because we didn't let people get away with garbage. And so my final point here is that we need to change the stereotypes. We need to turn them on their heads. We need to evolve the conversation of around race and make new icons. If Americans weren't so scared of Muslims, it's possible that Donald Trump wouldn't even be our most horrifying president right now. So take that, make new icons, change the stereotypes, and make them laugh while you do it. Thank you. Thank you.